visiting family. So
we've started recording.
All right. So I think we've got basically everyone, if not everyone here. We've got a lot of folks anyway, so let's get started. And yeah, we've got Jahmai back here, and Victor should be joining us shortly, so it'll be nice to see their faces and hear from them. So let's see, first order of business, the minutes. The minutes were sent out, at least for May. I don't know that I saw June, but I also wasn't at the June meeting, so that doesn't matter as much for me. But did the June minutes make it out to people? No? Okay. But you all should have seen the May minutes. Does anyone have any changes they would like to be made to the May minutes? Or do we still need a moment or two to review? Being met with a wall of silence, I will say let's take a minute or so to just look at them if you haven't already, take a quick scan, and then we'll go forward with a motion.
Do you want a motion to approve?
That'd be great, unless anyone has changes they'd like to have made.
I move to approve.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, before we vote, anyone have anything they want to say that they want to have changed? Nope. Okay. Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? Nope. All right, do we all agree they should be approved? Just give me a thumbs up. We all agree. All right, they are approved. So then moving on. Next, council update with Councilor Fagin.
Trying to catch a dinner. My update is a little personal in that I'm in Wyoming again. My daughter gave birth to twins on Friday, and they came home from the hospital Monday. So we've been helping out with our 2.5-year-old grandson and 2 twin girls, and everybody's doing great. They're about a little under 5 pounds right now, but eating well and doing all the things babies are supposed to do. So we have a very busy time, but it's been fun. On the council side, last month we made an offer and hired a full-time city manager. So Jen will start at the end of August. That's a little longer than what we were hoping for, but Kurt Wilson, who is the interim city manager, has agreed to work with us. He was officially done June 30th, but we've piecemealed together a team to make sure that the city is running as it should, and I think that's going well so far. It's still early, but I think in the summer months, those are the best months to be in this type of a transition. Other than that, lots has gone on since we've talked last, budget and like I said, city manager hiring and all kinds of things that are happening. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'm here to answer anything that you might have.
Any questions? All right, well, thanks very much for the update, and congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a fun time.
All right, Shannon, do you have any updates for us?
I have sent you the July updates, and this is going to be a jam-packed meeting, I think, so I'll just keep it real brief, and you all can look at those for more information. The budget was passed, so yay, and that began on July 1st. So we're into the new fiscal year. We are putting a lot of emphasis on saving water this summer, as we always try to over the summer, since water usage almost triples during the summertime. And the Beaverton Night Market is back and in person. It's also going to be in a new location, so it'll be downtown Beaverton at the intersections of First and Tucker. So that should be fun, and you can find more information about that online at the link that is in your email. And we'll just move right along.
And can I throw one thing in there, Shannon? Since in my household, the Chalk Festival is big every year.
Yeah.
There was the Chalk Festival first appeared at the Cedar Hill Shopping Center 3 years ago, and it was a really great event that drew a large number of people. Last year, it went to a remote event, and they videotaped it. And this year, it has joined with the night market, and there will be, I believe, 6 different artists, professional artists from around the country, drawing during the night market. So it should add something additional to a wonderful and one of my favorite events, which is the night market.
All right, well, does anyone have any questions for Shannon? Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is to welcome back Victor Sin and Jahmai Cherry. Jahmai's here already. Victor isn't here yet. Jahmai, are you guys planning to present together? Should we wait for him and do something else, or are you ready to get going?
I can get started. Well, hello, and it's so great to see everybody, first of all. Like, this is really cool. Like, I know some of you I haven't seen since interviews, some of you I haven't seen since last year. It's just really cool to see you all. Yeah, so I have been in contact with Victor. He's finishing up a meeting at Metro, and he'll be joining here, but I'm cool with getting started if you want, just in the interest of time, because I know you have a bunch that's going on.
So you're the feature of the night. So whatever works best for you, we will make work.
Yeah, so I do know Victor, he will definitely, maybe I could help you know a little bit more about like kind of some of the things that I'll cover versus some of the things that Victor will cover. Victor, I think when it comes to outreach, engagement, and especially like looking at THCRD's process and some of that, and maybe also a little bit, since he has done some work with Metro and kind of regionally, you know, speaking, like he'll give kind of a focus on that. Whereas me, I definitely bring, I think, kind of the overall process, some of the like implementation, and looking at kind of how the whole process overall goes. So I think, let's see, Shannon, CeCe, did you guys want to do interview style, or do you want me to just jump on in?
Yeah, I think the plan was for us to kick off with some questions, and you would be our panelists.
Happy to do that, and then you can ask the same questions of Victor. I'm sure he'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Welcome again, Jahmai. So I know that you do know most folks either through the interview process or other ways, but could you just give us kind of a brief overview of just your role at the city? And then because you've been at the city for a little while, you were involved in the previous vision. And so maybe just touch on what your role was with the vision, the last iteration, just to kind of give some context of that would be super helpful.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Jahmai Cherry. Hey, I see Victor's here. My name's Jahmai Cherry, pronouns he, him, his. And so my role at the city, I'm a marketing coordinator. And so Nicole, who's here, she is my supervisor. I work, you know, for and with her. And so some of the work that I focus on is digital engagement in particular. So that includes a lot of making sure things are good for the web, using digital tools, and also social media as well. So those are 3 areas. Now, as far as the vision is concerned, yes, I'm a big proponent. It's no secret. I'm an evangelist or cheerleader for the community vision. One of my first roles when I came to the city was as a staff liaison for the Visioning Advisory Committee. Cameron and I, we go pretty far back, right? He knew me when I was just a little guy at the city. But anyhow, I was involved in the from 2014 through 2016 vision implementation. So that was outreach, the recruitment of partners and theme teams, all of that stuff, the whole process to get from ideas to paper to plan, and then also helping to kind of like carry on and follow up from those plans in successive years, and also helping with reporting some of the like, hey, here's updates as far as what the vision has been up to, and one of my chief achievements, I'd say, or things that I've been involved and able to help with is writing language for making sure that vision actions are included in people's budgets. So that was a really cool move that I think that between like the council and, you know, administratively, there was a desire for, but being able to actually like craft some language so that it could go into, you know, how people craft their budgets was a really exciting time for me.
Great. Thanks, Jahmai. Hi, Victor.
Hello, deepest apologies. I'm running.
No worries.
So.
You're right on time. We just opened with a question. So the first question is just, could you just give a brief introduction, just where you are now at Metro and a little bit about what you do, and then just a call back to how you were involved when you worked with the city of Beaverton. What was your role with the vision, and what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see a ton of familiar faces. Cynthia, Brian, Sarah, my old colleague at Metro. Wade, how's it going, Cameron? Yeah, my role currently, I guess just to backtrack, I am what folks out here like to call a Beaverton townie. I've been here my entire life. Lived in various neighborhoods out here at Beaverton. My folks came here in the 80s as they found work at Tektronix, or Cambodian refugees who settled out here in Oregon, but which makes the vision so important and seeing our community grow and really respond to the needs of the community. And so my role currently at Metro, I'm a policy advisor, specifically repping District 4, which encompasses Forest Grove all the way out to West Slope, and as south as above TV Highway or Canyon Road. And so Councilor Gonzalez, Juan Carlos Gonzalez, and I rep District 4, and specifically I support him in policy work and policy making for the region. And so prior to that, I was at the city of Beaverton for almost 9 years. I started out in the neighborhood program and you know, had a couple years stint of working on the events program, and then moved into a government affairs, government relations type of role, where I became a staff liaison to the VAC, and I believe 2017, 2018. So there's a lot of familiar faces here who are new to the committee as I was starting out that first year. And so it was a learning curve for me as well. And so, and I was a visioning advisory committee liaison during pretty much an implementation phase. So our sole task was to work with our partners, our visioning partners, to determine how far along we are with the action items and what our community has asked for. And so we just did a lot of surveying and check back work and reporting out. And so it's super exciting to see that we're ready to go out and do a refresh. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. So are there maybe big pieces or an overview of the vision, just your experience working with the vision in the past, Maybe if you had an elevator pitch to describe the vision, like how would you say that to folks? And any other things you want to touch on in terms of your experience working on the vision in the past?
Jahmai, you want to start off?
I'll go. Yeah, sure. As far as an elevator pitch to describe the community vision, I would definitely, one of the best ways that I've heard it is Beaverton is a city where the residents or the people of the community have their hands on the wheel. And so they express how they'd like the community that they live in, that they work in, or that they even visit sometimes, how they want it to be in the future, like what makes Beaverton a great place for them. And so it's their way of letting not just the elected officials, but also the people who do work, from the people who you pay your water bill to, or all the way to, other people that the city works with. It lets them know what they want to see.
Thanks, Jahmai. I think how I would also describe it is at a point in time, it's a capture or a snapshot of the aspirations, wants, desires, and needs of the community based off of people's current experiences within the community. It can be hard for folks who may not have been in the community for very long, think about where they see or where they aspire Beaverton to be in the next 5 to 10 years. I also see it as a checks and balance in terms of ensuring that the needs of the community are met. And I think Councilor Fagin can attest to this when we're during budget season, departments have to incorporate how specific asks or funding proposals or goals meet specific visioning action items. And so it's sort of that checks and balance there. But I see Wade, you got your hand up. Nope. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was.
Oh, sorry, Wade. I couldn't see you. Go ahead.
On our process, are we, do you have a list of questions you want to go through? Do you want us to interrupt with when we have a questions? How do you want us to proceed?
I do have a list of questions. So maybe we get through the big overview first, and then, yeah, let's open it up for what questions you have. How about that?
That's fine. I just wanted to ask before I just blurted something out.
Thanks, Wade. I appreciate that. So let's say you're back in that elevator because you just gave the elevator pitch. So we're riding up the elevator. And if I said to you, okay, that's really interesting. So how did you do that? What are some of those big buckets of things that happen with the vision? Like, how do you do a community vision?
I recommend we start with, I'm not throwing you under the bus, Victor, but start with, with engagement, and maybe Victor could talk a little bit about that portion.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I was on the VAC, we were beginning to discuss how we would do a refresh and going back out to the community. And for my own personal understanding and sort of case study test dummy, I decided to apply for the THPRD visioning task force. So I can experience it from from your perspective. Like what is it like for a volunteer to actually go out to the community and do this work? Timing wise, it kind of worked out really well. I kept at it, but I also moved on to a new job. And so I wasn't really able to bring back until now, a year plus later, my experiences with actually doing 3 to 4 months worth of community engagement in person, surveying, calling, online, all the above. And so, and I'm happy to share some documents with the group in terms of like the scope of all of the different types of engagement activities that we did during those 3 to 4 months. and how our volunteers provided or input all of that data into a really easy, I guess, process for compiling in the end. But I mean, it was everything from looking for partnered events and doing in person, really asking that baseline question of what do you see, or what do you aspire your community to be in the next 5 years or so, and then having that conversation with that individual and breaking it down even further. But also being comfortable with outlier answers and responses. I mean, at THPRD, when I was doing that work, yeah, I would get answers that were just like, oh, that's interesting, but I would write it down because it's community feedback. And if there were enough of the same type of outlier responses, then it's no longer an outlier, and that's something we actually have to consider. You know, one of I shouldn't say crazy, but one of the interesting ideas was having like a obstacle jungle gym course for adults in the middle of downtown Beaverton. And that was something that I had to legitimately put into our feedback. And so yeah, that's kind of my short and long-winded answer for that.
I'd say that the food carts can sometimes be an obstacle course, but that's when it's busy. But yeah, so kind of going from like engagement, then really that's when once you kind of get some feedback from folks, then you have to do some sifting and kind of see, okay, what are the things that directly people have said the same thing 600 times, or that you've heard a lot of, and then you kind of also from there want to see, okay, well, what things kind of are similar, and there comes almost like a sifting sort of like, okay, you can't do all things for all people, but what's going to have the biggest bang for the buck, or the best, do the most good for the most people, and you kind of take a look and see, and also who are some folks that perhaps you've never heard from before that you're hearing from now. That's also another consideration. But once you have those, then you kind of get an idea of like, all right, cool. So we know that there's going to be folks, talking about transportation or parks and recreation. And, these are things that the city of Beaverton as an organization might not necessarily cover, but, let's see who can help to bring this forward. And so that's where partners kind of come into play, and you start these discussions with them. And then sometimes, depending upon how many ideas you get, you're going to have to sift those down. And that might mean going back out to the community for a brief period of time and just kind of whittling down like, okay, so here's what we heard. Is this correct? And then after that, you get your partners to kind of get some solidified actions of steps of what they can take. And then from there, you present that to council, and council will say, that's awesome. How can we help? Or they'll say, this doesn't seem, like we might have some questions or some tweaks or something like that. And from there, really, once council does adopt it, then it's the VAC's job to kind of make sure that plan is brought to fruition, and people again are checked in to see that they're set up for success to do the best that they can.
And so last meeting, we touched on the concept of the I think we've called it a couple different things, action teams or theme teams, or maybe other words. I think we've used several words. So I think our understanding is we go to the community, we're tabling, we're doing surveys, or multiple modes of getting as much information as we can. So we get, thousands of ideas. Those get whittled down to, like you said, sifting, and then action teams happen, is our understanding. Can you talk about that process a little bit more for us? Can you paint a picture of what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the more interesting and fun things. And I think, Councilor Fagin and Cameron can attest, because I think they've been in those physically, and you're not wrong. Action teams and theme teams, they're both the same thing, but it's been called each. But what it is basically, that there's going to be general topics and people who work with things. For example, like public safety, public services being one, transportation being one. You've got downtown was one, and so that there are folks that might be specialists or active participants within that particular area. The theme teams or action teams, let's just call them theme teams. That's keep it one. The theme teams will meet several times, so to kind of look at the items that pertain to that particular topic or that particular theme. So a good one will say vibrant downtown. Some of the folks that are in there, not just VAC members, you definitely want to have VAC members in the theme team or involved with the theme team, because they're the ones that have done the active outreach and they're advocating to make sure that the will of the people that they brought forth isn't changed into something that's entirely funky, that's like, and doesn't become someone's pet project or anything like that. You want to make sure that you're keeping the integrity of what people say, whether you agree with it or not. If it's what people said, you're the advocate for it. But so you have VAC members, you have some other community members that might be involved in projects downtown. For example, we had some of the folks from the downtown team in the city that were there. There's usually a council liaison or counselor of some sort that's in there to kind of talk about hey, in case there's questions that need to be asked, they're not representing all of council, but they can at least give kind of an informed opinion of, if this is brought to council, here's how this process would work. Or to give insight, because they know a lot about what goes on with the city. And so anyhow, you definitely want to have all those folks there. You go over kind of, here's we'll say 150 different things that were related to downtown that people had mentioned. They want a swimming pool downtown, or they want, whatever it might be. And so you look at those and you see, okay, how realistic is it to make that sort of thing happen? Who's the person that would do that sort of thing? And how do we express that in terms of as an action that can be taken?
That's great. Thank you, Jahmai. Victor, any thoughts to add about theme teams?
Not too much, other than the theme teams are revisited during our annual partners reception. During an implementation phase, all the partners are invited back to come together and sort of celebrate implementation throughout that current cycle year, I guess you could say. And then we'll do our best to try and gather folks within those theme teams to revisit a lot of the action items that are, we can check the box on, or ones that are still pending, and seeing what more can we do to get those into a place that is a lot further along. And so I wasn't quite there like Jahmai was for the actual creation of things and outcomes of the theme teams, but we did do a similar model over at TH Purity. So
Great, thank you. So what about some challenges, some words of advice, just things that the past VAC committee had to deal with, or just things that we need to be aware of?
A couple things. First and foremost, you are the VAC, and so it's nice to get input from how things have been done, but just keep in mind that the community changes, technology changes, that that you don't need to follow the exact roadmap that has been done in the past. I think lean into the fact that you're a new group. Don't let that intimidate you. I think fresh ideas are what make a great experience. Then the other, I think one of the kind of interesting things that I had someone give me a phone call one day. It was like a Friday afternoon, like 4:45. I get this phone call and someone's like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the community vision." And I was like, "Okay, cool, all right, let's chat." And it was a kind of a voice of dissent, and it was one of the best conversations. Sticks with me all the time. This person had said, "Hey, when you talk to people, I've heard a lot of like, what do you want us to do? What more do you want us to do? No one asked what we should be doing less of or what we can be doing differently." And so don't think of it in terms of how you can add on. It might be sometimes to make the community, the community's vision might entail having less going on, so be sure that when you do speak to people, you're listening to what they're having to say, and don't be afraid to kind of, tease that out or ask questions, that might lead towards that. And then the third thing I think that's really important is timing. Victor had touched on the fact that you're getting a slice of time. If you have this process go on for, too long of doing outreach, you will get a like kind of an amorphous blob of things, like, because things can be topical. One of the things when they had talked about, like, was that I had learned about was, people had talked about from chickens all the way to baseball, because there was the potential of a baseball stadium at one point, and then there was like, changing laws in regards to chickens. And, the things that you hear could be a reflection of where we are in time right now, but you want it to be that, to a certain extent, like you do. But the longer you go, the more like if you talk to people right now, COVID's going to be on the mind for a lot of people, but if you were to go, 2 years from now, which you don't want to, it could be something else. So you want to be responsive to the needs of the community as it is.
Yeah, just to kind of write on that real quick is being as flexible, accessible, welcoming in terms of how interactions with the community is done. Folks are still going to be expecting, that we're in this weird virtual world, and thinking outside of, doing in-person types of engagement, and I'm thinking more of like, what innovative ways can you get to the community, especially because the community demographics are so different across different neighborhoods out here. There's new communities being sprung up that are used to certain types of interactions. And so, having a really inclusive and equitable outreach and engagement process is going to be really, really important. And so, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Let's kick to questions, because I think those are good, like first big picture questions. And now I'm sure we've got a lot of other things. So Amy, you had to put a question in the chat. Do you want to offer that one? And then Wade, we can kick to you, and Subba, I think I saw your hand too.
Sure, thanks. And this kind of, I think, dovetails with the point that Victor was just making about ensuring that your outreach is inclusive and equitable, and we really want that. But one thing we also have talked about as a VAC is that we want to ensure that we're hearing from communities that we hear from less. And so I think we've pretty much all said that we want to then prioritize those ideas from those communities that are heard from less. So I'm wondering, when you were talking about the theme teams and how they go, how would you recommend that we prioritize those ideas, especially if they're not the majority ideas, if you have any insight based on that? And then also just how would you make sure that outreach was inclusive, if you have any ideas on that?
I guess in my opinion, I think ideas like and prioritizing shouldn't be thought of as majority rules. I think it should be more thought of as this particular set of community members has this specific need or aspiration that should be addressed by our local government, because it's a need that may have been unmet for some time. And so I think all ideas, especially ones that we know are from marginalized communities, should be, highly valued and prioritized in that sense. And that's kind of what we did at THPRD. It's also what we do at Metro when we're doing focus groups and doing some visioning and strategic planning, is that we know that we have a specific set of community members that have historically been marginalized and unheard. And we need to make sure that their voices are at the top and elevated as part of our equity strategy. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
And I agree entirely with Victor. Having an equity lens as opposed to an equality lens in your operating procedures. So if you do realize, like, hey, the loudest voices or like the majority voices or whatever are being heard, you kind of get an idea of like, okay, cool, who are some folks that we haven't heard from, and thinking, okay, let's make sure that the things from the people that we haven't heard from traditionally are put on the board, and that, that's where you as a VAC in the theme teams, for example, you say, hey, look, you know what, this particular, like, I think for one was like gardens. That was one that, like, it wasn't per se that there were a lot of people in the city that had said, we want community gardens, even though it's a more popular thing now. But I think there were immigrant communities, that had said, hey, a place to do some gardening would be awesome, so that we can grow some vegetables, so that, we can commune. And so that was something that the VAC made sure stayed on the board, even though it wasn't like as high up as like food carts or whatever it would have been. But, just having that view to equity.
Thank you. Wade, do you have questions?
Yes, and I have more than one, but the one to follow up with what Amy was saying, if this is a repeat, then just shut me off on it. But Jahmai, you said two things that I'm trying to work out. One is you said looking for doing the most good for the most people, which is sort of that majority oriented kind of focus. And then at the same time, you also said being sensitive to ideas that were coming from uncommon sources that may not stand out. And so I guess my question to follow up with Amy, because I thought you answered Amy's question fairly well, but my question is, who takes the lead? Do you see that as part of the VAC's responsibility to make sure that those small, I'll call them small ideas, the ones that come up few, but seem to be good ideas and could be effective ideas for small groups? Is it the VAC's responsibility to monitor those and make sure they, as you call it, put on the board? Or how do we work? How does that responsibility get put into action?
Well, that, first of all, Wade, I love you, man. Like, you're so cool. But like, think of the name of your, you're the Visioning Advisory Committee, right? And I think that your job as the VAC is to advise not just the council, not just, but also advise the people in the theme teams. Like, hey, look, this is a group of folks that we traditionally have not heard. I think it would be for the benefit of the community if we implement this action. You know, I think some of it, you as a group will be able to determine and take a look at and see like context behind certain action items or certain requests or certain ideas that come up. And, you know, I think that this group, you know, especially will have that, you know, that sensitivity and the forethought of knowing the difference between this guy said that we should, you know, have something really weird like a you know, multi-billion-dollar theme park, and it's one person. That's not going to be, you know, that's not going to be necessarily something that's representative of a community, you know. And I think that like you have that ability, and when the time comes, having those standards kind of set of like wanting to have a view for equity, you'll be able to make that decision as it comes. But you're the ones that are advocating for what the community asked for.
Okay, so it is our job. You do see it as our job to actually follow up and make sure that the city takes on these actions. So we are kind of in a job of setting some priorities.
Your job is to advise. You know, again, just keep in mind, you're an advisory committee,
Right.
and you give the justification of like, hey, we advise that, you know, this action be forwarded when the time comes, because this is, you know, from an underrepresented community, or, you know, and when I say like do the most for the most, like that's not to take a meritocracy or like, you know, like a percentage, you know, viewpoint. It's to say, you know, how will the community be better by listening to the voices of underrepresented folks.
Okay.
So Subba, I think, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
little bit ago,
And
okay.
I do have several questions, but I think I can follow up this one. And this is more directly to Jahmai, I think. By the way, first of all, nice to put a face to your voice. You only spoke
Likewise.
on the phone before. But my question was, in your current role, do you have access? So reaching historically underrepresented communities and groups has been a big thrust for us in this cycle, and we've been talking a lot about that. So in your current role, do you have access to or a reach to some of these you know, historically underrepresented groups or communities, and do you think about that for, you know, in your communications when you're trying to reach these people, reach everybody in the community?
Thank you. That's a great question, and likewise, it's good to get a face with the name. So let me just kind of 2-second answer this. Like the answer is no. I don't have tools for that. Like I can't get into communities of underrepresented, you know, folks. But what I can say is that the city itself has engagement folks. So, you know, there's groups that various parts of the city have been working with, but it will never be as good as the relationships that you work on building today. And that what is most important is if you already can acknowledge who a particular group might be, you know, think about how you want to engage them and begin that engagement. Like that's, you know, that's going to be better. Like digital engagement, there's no magic pill. It's no line of code that I can put in that's going to get us in touch with everybody who speaks Hmong, or, you know, and even then that doesn't mean necessarily that, you know, they're going to want to talk to the city. So a relationship will always be above technology.
Victor, do you have any things to add in about engagement with communities of color, underrepresented folks? So you were on the THPRD visioning group. So I just want to make sure that was clear that you participated in that. And then of course, city employee with our vision. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important to leverage the relationships that the city has existing with organizations that do outreach to and have those networks with underrepresented communities. At THPRD, we subcontracted with Centro Cultural, Unite Oregon, to help expand out our reach. And City of Beaverton has a really robust diversity, equity, and inclusion program with lots of great contacts and resources. So I would assume that they would be available to support in coming up with a robust engagement plan for reaching underrepresented communities. So, yeah.
Thanks, Victor. Rachel.
Hey, my question is like along very similar lines, which is mostly around measuring success around reaching underrepresented communities, and like in your experiences, what have been some of the most successful ways to like try to gather that type of data? Like it seems pretty easy to do, like if you're filling out an online form, you just like ask some demographic data, but harder to do if like you are like catching someone like in the farmer's market or something else. So I'm curious to hear what your experiences with that are.
I guess at the Parks District, we didn't, as volunteers, when we were doing outreach and engagement, we didn't necessarily capture specific demographic information. It was really just focusing on the feedback that we were getting. I would say that's sort of different when it comes to the types of events, activities that we would do our engagement at, because there were some that were very specific to ensuring that we're reaching out to underrepresented communities. And so, yeah, we just didn't take that demographic information.
I definitely would say that like you don't want to look at it as transactional, or don't look at it as like, oh, checklist, like that's definitely not. And I don't think that you would, like, I've had discussions with you, Rachel. I know, kind of your viewpoint on this, and but I think that like as a group, you want to make sure that one, you're not considering people monolithic, and two, you're not looking at it as simply checklisting and transactional, and that it's not going to be perfect. Like you're never going to get perfect. Yes, you can always strive to do better, right? But like, I think that the idea is there are folks, for example, coalitions of communities of color, like, Washington County, that you can kind of, hey, check my data on this, check, what thoughts do you have, or how can you help me out? The Diversity Advisory Board, I don't want to commit another, board to work, but like, I mean, it's okay to reach out. If you feel like, I don't know what's a good, how can I figure this out? Go to the experts,
Sarah Keane.
Hi, first of all, it is lovely to see your faces, Jahmai and Victor. Miss you guys. Okay, so first of all, I'm like really proud of the committee and how focused we all are on the type of outreach we'd like to do. I'm really excited about this group. I'm gonna change directions just a little bit though, because my question is more about the end product. So I'm curious, with the current vision, if you would have done anything differently in terms of prioritization, because it's very flat, right? Like there's no area that's a higher priority than the others. And so that's kind of tough when you're using it as a tool or direction. So I'm going to sneak two questions in here. But so one is just around, would you prioritize it differently and weigh things more important than others? And then the second one is kind of a loaded question, but it's just the role of partners in the end product. And like, it's so powerful to include everyone, but also so hard to hold those parties accountable. So would you have done anything different with partners?
I would love to answer this question, if you don't mind, both of those. so I will say, you know, I'm not going to give any yay or nay on prioritization, but I will say that it was intentional, the thought of not having any one action prioritized. I think it was really the case of all of them are meaningful in very different ways. So, you know, what direction you go, that's up to you guys, to y'all folks. But like, as far as partners, I heard this really cool saying, and you probably have heard it, that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. Like, that's sort of like the thought process behind involving partners. So I think what I have seen when trying to do the pitch meeting to, like, you know, get people to commit to actions, I've heard, for example, like Tom at TriMet, like he had said specifically, this is really awesome to hear directly, for you to come give me a list of, like, here's the things that we've spoken to 5,000 plus people or whatever, you know, that you've spoken to a good section of the community. It helps us to know in our planning, you know, and so so I do think that there is some value with you know, with working with partners, but then again, that's entirely up to what direction you want to go. And some partners you absolutely have to work with, like, you know, are absolutely necessary, especially those that touch communities that you know, that the city might not necessarily have strong relationships with. And I think that it's something to think about.
Yeah, at the Parks District, we actually sort of did do prioritization of specific action items, and then there was sort of a grab bag of, like, special mentions as appendices, so to speak, of, like, we'll get to these when we have capacity and resources. And so, you know, it's one way that you can look at it. But in terms of, like, partner cultivation, it's a fine balance between the existing relationships that city staff have with a lot of these partners and the relationships that you as VAC members will cultivate with partners as well. And in a way, it's a restart for many in terms of the space, but it's also you know, there's going to be a lot more like newer partners as well. Like, I could speak for like Washington County priorities and regional priorities like affordable housing and supportive housing services. There's just going to be so many new great nonprofits, organizations to connect with. And so you'll want to be able to try to delicately not step on the toes of each other between staff and VAC, and, like, make sure that the communication is there and the roles are and expectations are really clear in terms of, as a VAC member, what is your role in this relationship versus you know, the staff's role. And so it's just something to keep in mind.
Cynthia.
Hi, Jahmai and Victor, thank you so much. It's been a long time since I've seen you guys, and I really appreciate the big picture overview. I was feeling a little lost the last few meetings, trying to figure out, like, what we're doing and what impact we could possibly have. My outstanding question and everything is, as priorities come in, if it doesn't match what the city's currently doing, then what? You know, right now the city has, like, a housing options project. There's you know, there's public safety officers. There's a lot of you know, the downtown project. There's a lot of things happening. So what if the feedback comes back that, I'm going to go all crazy and say, like, what if we don't want a vibrant downtown? What if we, you know, what if we all want to hide and never go out again and never have any fun? that, you know, but the city has already invested so much energy into it that then what? But that what would then happen?
Yeah, my instincts tell me, and I have an anecdote after this. My instincts tell me, based off of Jahmai's previous response to the fact that you are the advocates and the advisory to our policymakers, is that it's certainly up to the VAC to determine direction of where to go with, like, you know, we don't want to have any more fun. But at the same time, it's also, in my opinion, you are the voice of the community based off the feedback that you're receiving. And so if the voice of the community says we don't want to have any more fun, then that is something that you would advise in the visioning action plan as something that the community has asked for. And so I'll just leave that at that. But just for the group to be aware of how impactful the visioning has been, Cynthia, Jahmai, myself, and others took a trip down to Denver a few years ago because the city was a finalist in the All-America City award for this very program. And we competed against, you know, several dozen other cities across that made it up to the finalists.
Las Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, Las Vegas, Tacoma, Pasco, Washington. But yeah, just the impact and the importance of this work is known across the country. So.
Don't tell me we lost because of no casinos.
I
No
think that
fun.
might have something to do.
We don't know. Cameron, you're next.
First of all, thank you for being here, Jahmai and Victor. I was always wondering what Jahmai is up to because we know who Victor was. So great to see you. So my thought is, you know, it has been discussed in pretty much detail, and I was also luckily was part of this committee when we went through the first go round. I think that our biggest advantage to is our main, just like Jahmai and Victor and several other people has mentioned, our role in this as a VAC is an advisory role. Our job is to collect the data. Once the data is collected, we have several layers that we can go to that can be available to us. And especially now, we have a project manager. That would be a very good resource for us. And then we also would have a consultant. That consultants, that was we were doing in our previous go round when we are collecting the data. And because of different focus groups or different committees, everybody's passionate because that's a human nature. Everybody's passionate of something. And sometimes you are more passionate about one and lesser on the other. So so you bring your focus up. And then at that time, your consultant plays a role to smooth things out, to explain and to figure out that what goes in what category. And sometimes 2 or 3 ideas, they may look very different, but once they can get analyzed, they turn out to be that they are falling in a very nicely in several 5 or 6 or 7 buckets. So sometimes we have to figure out that how this one idea is impacting and where it can be placed. And then at the end of the day, we have a 6, 7, 8 categories. And that's what we did in the past. And I believe that our consultant and also having a project manager will make this time process even much smoother.
You could have just like had Cameron talk about all this because he's been through it all. But like, yeah, but that the consultant, I will definitely say, made a big difference. And whether or not some of that work will be done by the project manager or the consultant, the benefit of having, you know, that other advocate that sees things from kind of a global perspective and also doesn't necessarily have like any money on any particular item. They treat kind of the data as data in that sense, and say, hey, here's where we want to go, and here's what the VAC is advocating for, or the advising, so that, like Cameron said, when people come with passions and they really truly want to, hey, we're working on this building and we want this building to be the end all be all for everything, they're able to say, hey, look, but what people really want, more solar chargers, or more, like whatever it is. And so lean into those, the project manager and or consultant, if you work with a consultant, lean into them.
Amy.
I have a question which is sort of related to the topic of the plan timely. And so within the last few weeks, we just had a really big heat wave. And the city really wasn't necessarily prepared in terms of like cooling shelter locations or anything like that, I felt. And this was a foreseeable impact of the climate crisis. And I'm just wondering if, I feel like there is a responsibility within our group to ask the community about how they want the city to prepare for climate change. I'm just wondering if you think that's a legitimate idea. Also, like, do you think we should be putting that in our outreach, what we're asking people about, and your ideas around climate change and getting people's for resiliency and like adaptation? Thank you.
As far as like, I would say any particular one topic, is going to be something that's important to us as individuals. It's going to be important to also the community. And I think that the idea, again, is the conversation you want to have with people is what's top of mind for them at that point in time. And it could be very well that, climate action, climate change is going to be something that they want to talk about, but you don't want to per se start with a given topic, unless there's, they're like, hey, well, I don't know, give me some ideas. What do you want to talk about? Sort of thing. But like keeping it and starting with that open-ended is where you probably want to work with, because sometimes the things that affect people on their day-to-day life might ladder up to, oh, you know what, this all falls under that climate change umbrella. And if you get them down a particular road, we might miss that connection. And so I think that that's like, a good example for that was the climate action plan that the city has, and just kind of it talks about disparate outcomes for different people. And so knowing some of those outcomes that might have for people, or the things that people talk about, it might all ladder right back up to, to a bigger picture. And we don't want to miss that, that opportunity for people to express themselves, to express, how things are affecting them on their day-to-day. But when the time comes and climate conversation comes around, it's good to have someone who's well-versed in that.
Yeah, I just to follow that real quick, like from what I experienced is the environment, even the location that the individual that you are speaking to is at can dictate the conversation and the feedback they provide you. And so a good example is if you're conducting engagement at Party in the Park at THPRD, all of the responses mostly will be parks and nature related versus like, ones that happen in front of City Hall or in front of Restaurant Row in downtown Beaverton. I would also, agree with Jahmai in ensuring that, the first initial question that is asked can prompt an individual to sort of think about, more broadly what is of top of mind to them, but being versed in issues like climate change and city's response to that. It's going to be really important, which also leads me to you know, one thing that I experienced when I was doing engagement with THPRD is a lot of people would provide ideas that were already in place or already far along, and they just might not have known about it. We were given sort of like a cheat sheet of things that are high level THPRD projects that were in the works or things that were kind of there. And so I don't know if it's something where you just would want to intake the idea and leave it be, or just say, hey, we're already doing that. And having that information readily available. But yeah, that's all up to y'all to decide.
Thank you. I do want to make sure that we have enough time. I don't, Brian and Sarah, you may have a few things that you want to also slide in the next 20 minutes. I did also want to show a potential survey that we talked about. So I just wanted to lob those two things out there of things. So Wade, I think you have your hand up as a question, and I guess if there's any other questions, we can maybe drop them in the chat and we can follow up with Jahmai and Victor also via email. We can grab the answers from them or those types of things as well.
And my question is kind of a nuts and bolts question about the action teams. And I'm curious how they were created. How big did they become? How did you choose who to be on them? I can see that some could be enormous because there could be a lot of vested interest, and some might be small. And I was just wondering, on a nuts and bolts basis, how were the action teams created? And did the VAC have some say in how that happened?
Yeah, the VAC definitely had some say in how they were created, but like each team consisted of about a dozen people, I'd say. There were usually about 2 to 3 VAC members on that, and then like I mentioned, a counselor was on that, and so that's right there, 3, 4, 4 folks. Then subject matter experts, depending upon you get that preliminary look at once the data is collected, like you kind of have an idea of like, okay, cool. So we're going to be talking a lot about parks. Let's get parks folks in there. If you're going to be talking a lot about housing, you want to probably get regional housing folks in there. And they're broken up again, or not broken up. They're distributed by the genre. And each meeting was, we actually, I probably wouldn't recommend them, but we had them once a month for 3 months. And each one was like about a 4-hour meeting. And you'd have your subject matter experts, some city planners might be in there. You might have a department head from the library. You could have, we had our police captains, 2 police captains in one of them, folks from TVFNR.
And Jahmai, those theme teams were created with whatever the top 7, 10, whatever topics that floated to the top. Is that correct? Yeah. That's what created your action teams.
Well, yeah, okay. They were led by the VAC taking a look at the data and having a preliminary look at the data and saying, okay, here are the things that we're gathering from this, and here's some that might require some conversation with future partners, if you're going to be working with partners, or how that works, but the goal is ultimately VAC has taken a look at the data. They've had a preliminary crash at it, and they want to talk to some subject matter experts about how to take these wants and turn them into actions.
Great, thank you so much. So Jahmai and Victor, any parting thoughts, or you're welcome to stay around for the next 15 minutes while we take a quick look at potential survey?
No, I would just say it's just such an exciting time to be a member of the VAC because it's interactive, it's being out in the community and representing, you know, for the betterment of Beaverton. You know, any support that I can provide, certainly Metro as a partner. I'm going to be kind of your go-to person for that, all things parks and transportation and regional waste and recycling. Just reach out to me.
For me, I definitely think keep the passions that you have, the things that make this group as strong as it is. It's what's going to help retain to make sure that what the community asks for is delivered to the air quote powers that be. So don't be afraid to be who you are when when you're sharing what the community wants. So and I can't thank you enough. As volunteers, you're doing way better work than I could probably do in a day. So thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you giving us time on a Wednesday night. So thanks. So feel free to peel off or stick around or whatever you need to do. Brian and Sarah, other business?
I think the only business we have left, and again, thanks to Victor and Jahmai, it's great to see you guys and appreciate all your thoughts. And I'm sure we'll be reaching back out at a number of points between now and the end of this too. But I think the only thing we have left is what we emailed about with the initial survey question. So if you have, CeCe, if you have a mock-up of that, you can put up on the screen or some way to share that. Why don't we talk about that now?
Yeah. So first, don't be scared. Don't be scared. You're scared. I can see your faces. It's going to be okay.
I don't get scared, CeCe.
But let me give you context and give you a chance to read it. So what I did, so to Amy's question in the chat, so what I did was, as your project manager, your current acting project manager, so I went and I looked at the DEI plan, the climate action plan, the last visions that we had, the budget, council priorities from 2019, which is the last time that those priorities were developed. And I picked out, and your past meeting notes from the last year. So the people, some folks are no longer on the VAC, and some of you are new. So you've had several conversations. So I watched many meetings and made many lists. So these are potential survey choices we want to do along with your tabling and your outreach. We want to do an initial survey, electronic survey, which would be a link that we would give people on social media or other places, email it out. You all can share it where you want. We're trying to get some idea of what are those topics that the community feels are most important so we can then create the theme teams. So we have a number of topics on here. The magic number for most surveys is about 7. So we do have probably way too many on this list. So we do have to narrow it down just a scotch, but I wanted to show you all of the topics that I could come up with that are from those various places and just get your initial advice on whatever. So the first question is choose your top 3 community goals. So the thought would be a person would get the link, they would open it up. They're going to choose, oh no, housing is not my first priority. They're going to choose their top 3. So you move on down the list and you're going to rank them 1, 2, and 3. You also will have the opportunity to write in other, because this is not an exhaustive list at all. It's just like the Post-it note exercise we talked about with tabling. People are going to want to write in all kinds of stuff and we want to give them that opportunity. And then number 2, to the point we talked about last meeting was we want to just have people provide an opportunity to riff, give us any information they want to tell us. These are not any of my choices. Here's more information why I think trees are most important. You also need to talk to X, Y, and Z, anything they want to tell us. So this is the initial survey draft. And it's scary and I apologize, but we could not figure out another way to show it to you.
So CeCe, I have a couple of questions to start off with while other people take a look at this, since I've seen this before.
Yeah.
One, just on a sort of just a semantic question, with the initial question being, please choose your top 3 community goals. Is there a reason why we say top 3 community goals instead of 3 issues that are most important to you, or is there some thought behind that phrasing?
I think we were just looking back at the past visions. We can say it, word it however we want to.
Oh, absolutely. I was just wondering if that's something that's been successful in the past, let's keep it. But just curious if there was thought on that. And then
totally open.
Cool. And then for question 2, I like how it's phrased, except maybe I'd like to add another option on the list. So remove that and then say, have an option to say, explain the other, right? Providing information about why you chose the goals you did, any details you feel may be important, and anything you think is important that's not listed above, just to make that very clear. Because that would be an easy way to eliminate the other option from the list above if we're trying to shorten the number of items there while still giving people an option to explain the other item that they think is important.
Okay.
That's a great suggestion. Very good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Those are my first 2 big hits, but I also like playing with words too much, so I could do that for too long.
CeCe, I want to first say thank you for gathering this from all the different places. Like, that's super amazing and useful for you to synthesize it. I really appreciate it. In terms of how to present it to people, like, I'm not a survey expert, but limiting it to 3 is hard for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's other options. Maybe it's top 5, or maybe it's put all of them in order, or maybe it's under each one there's a sliding bar about how much you care about it and room to write things in if you wanted. I don't know.
Okay.
But I love the initial list and gathering things, and it was really helpful to hear from Victor and Jahmai about, we don't have to be perfect about this. I think, I'm going to feel better once we actually start getting some information to work with.
Me too.
so I appreciate you keep putting tools in front of us. Thank you.
I was not paying attention to hands. I'm sorry. Was somebody else? I can't.
I see the hand, so I can call on those
Brian.
for you. So Amy had hers up, but that might be from a while ago. I don't know if that's still up for you. Okay, so then Cynthia was next, and then Wade after her, and then Rachel Phillip.
I was thinking about a comment that Jahmai made earlier about not only thinking about things we can do more of, but maybe think about things we may want to do less of. And I'm curious about, is there a way we can fine tune the way we're wording this to allow for that to happen?
Yeah, that's a great point. So giving people an option to say what they don't think is a priority or something like that.
Well, I mean, I don't.
Something.
Yeah, I don't know how that would look, because everything on here, we want more transportation and better. We want more senior care and better. But are there things that, like, is there a way we could phrase the question so we can also think about things we might want less of? I mean,
okay. Let me wrap my head around that. And Nicole's on the call too from marketing. And so she's really going to help us wordsmith and get the survey out there and all of that. So we can try to wrap our heads around that piece. Thanks, Nicole, for sticking with us through this part too.
Sure. Can I just chime in for 2 seconds too?
Please.
The way this is presented to you right now is truly only so that we can get it all information in one place for you to review as a slide. This is going to be delivered electronically as a digital survey that is compatible with desktop, mobile, etc. And also, if paper copies need to be made available. So our goal is multi-channel, multimodal way of taking this survey. And also, as CeCe mentioned, this is kind of like that preliminary broad stroke, broad initial, think of this as a temperature check with the community. And again, we're not wanting to go as detailed yet with this preliminary survey. We are literally just kind of like casting a very wide net. And yes, we do have availability for it to be multilingual as well. The city has 7 languages that we support, and the specific vendor that we're going to be working with to administer this survey, they are able to translate into all of those supported languages.
I really appreciate that information, Nicole. That's super helpful. Wade had the next question.
Yeah, my question had to do with formatting, I guess, and maybe that's, I'm too early in the process, but I really like the examples that are given in the parenthetical comments. I think it's helpful for explaining, but in terms of formatting, that many words on the page can also be really confusing. So yeah, using bold print or large print or something like that to highlight the titles could be really helpful. So.
Okay.
But I like having the examples there, so I wouldn't want to take them out, but it's just something to pay attention to.
Okay. Who is next?
Rachel.
Rachel.
Hey. As far as like shortening the list, I wonder if we could combine A and N, housing and homelessness, into like sort of a general housing for both, people who currently don't have housing, as well as maintaining people's housing. That was my only suggestion.
And Jen, I think I saw in the chat, but my chat isn't, I have too much on my screen. You said something else, combine another two, didn't you?
Yeah, I just said C and D. See, I thought C and D were similar enough. I mean, definitely different, but that they could be combined.
Okay, let me take a look at that.
I would just, I thought about C and D being combined also, and then I started thinking about all the small businesses that don't have employees. And so it's kind of it is a very different kind of process also, so.
And I agree with Wade. I think they are very different.
So to not combine business and workforce?
Yes, please.
Do not do that. Okay.
Do not.
Yeah.
So maybe or maybe not. Okay.
It's a tough call.
We can look at that. Okay.
And I think Amanda has her hand up, but it's kind of blending in with the background.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. It is blending in with the background on my screen.
It does. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I wanted to express support for something that was mentioned and also was in the chat as well. I think the idea of having some sort of ranking for, especially on this broad of a scale, instead of ranking all 7 in order, maybe doing a sliding scale of some sort for each one of those options, because what it does is it gives us the option to hear what people want more of and what they want less of, because if they don't think that something is important for us to be investing resources in, they'll rank it as a 1 or a 2 as opposed to something that's very important to them. And that's something that could be easier to navigate on a mobile device instead of, because I can see myself, like Amy mentioned, like trying to scroll back up and see what all the options are depending on what size my screen is, and trying to rank those in order. And so if we're trying to get just a really broad idea of what the temperature read is, ranking those, and then that second question makes a lot more sense to me as the survey taker, because then I've had a chance to evaluate each of these options on just a gut check feeling. And then if I have more details I wanted to add about why I chose what I did, or add more detail or express what's missing, I've already had a touch point with each of those items.
Okay.
I really like that idea.
I do too.
I mean, we could do also, yeah, we could do the rank. Yeah, you're right in that the things that don't rise to the top is an indicator, right? And then we could do ranking 1 through 3. We could do important to not important. I mean, we could kind of figure that what's the best. And so there are, I don't know how many things there are on here, 12
I think there are 14.
or 14. That's a lot, but we also need to, if we do take something off the list, I mean, there's still the opportunity for people, if they feel like it resonates with them, then it's going to make some sort of list, I think. I just was nervous about choosing what should not be in the 14. I wasn't sure. So I don't know if you have advice about that.
So CeCe, I think the suggestion to combine housing and homelessness into one was a good one. Does anyone have concerns about doing that? I'm not hearing any, so I think we can do that and that'll take off one. And then if we augment question number 2 to include a place to talk about other things, then we can take off other, especially if we end up doing a sliding scale, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. So then we're down to 12. All of the rest of them feel really important. We're also kind of city and invested type of people. So it might be that there's some, when these sorts of surveys have gone out in the past, are there any categories like these that routinely don't get much traction because they're not things most people tend to think about? And because I think that could be one way to remove a category to make for a cleaner list.
I mean, I think the only one that stands out to me is youth engagement.
I agree with that.
I think all of the others are kind of action items the city does, but if we're calling out youth engagement, why aren't we calling out different communities too?
I think youth engagement fits well within community building and inclusion. You know, at least those sort of sentiments and principles. Does anyone else concerned about taking off youth engagement?
How about this, if we put community building, inclusion / youth engagement, just add in there?
Or could we put it as one of the 4 examples?
Yeah.
4, not 4, but you know, FOR.
I like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Let me play with that and see what, okay, so that's another thing we can kind of play around with. We decided not to combine business and workforce development, but let me think through that one.
And we're taking G out. That will help a lot.
Taking out G.
So that takes us down to 11 items.
Yeah, and Amy, you had a question, I think I saw in the chat about safety. I kind of struggled a little bit with the 4 examples. I wasn't sure, so I did want to ask that question too. If we previously we had public safety in there, and I thought, well, it's really kind of more a broad question of safety. But any thoughts about the 4 examples in there?
I just wanted to ask one other thing quickly, which was about the housing and homelessness. We're combining those, right? We're not like taking homelessness out of the, okay, cool. The safety thing, I don't know, because there's been the whole conversation around like addressing safety and like policing within the community over the past year. Like listing policing right afterwards safety, just to me is kind of a red flag, because police don't make everybody safe. So I don't know how to make the wording better, but it just makes me a little uncomfortable.
I want to add to that, the city and the school district are about to embark on a year-long partnership to discuss school resource officers, and it feels like a timely topic at the moment.
So I see Wade and Cameron with their hands up. Are you guys do you have comments on this topic, or should we finish up this one, then come back to you?
I just have a quick comment for the spacing reasons. If we can use 2 fonts, like just like a transportation, when we say, for example, can we make that one as a smaller font? So that will make it less cluttered a little bit.
I think I think that's a good idea. And I think that's one of the things we'll talk about once we start working on the design of it. But I think right now we're trying to focus on the items. And then Wade, did you have a thought on the safety conversation, or was yours a different thing?
Different topic.
All right, so I just like to make one note on safety and also get other folks to chime in on that. That way we can be organized about this. I think including policing as an example within safety is important because a lot of our discussion when it's been around safety and public safety this last year has been about changes to policing. And so I think that very much signals to people that we're talking about all these different ways that we feel safe within our community. And for some people, policing, I think for most people, policing is an important part of safety, whether they feel like policing needs to be reformed, stay the same, somewhere in the middle of all that. And I think if we were to separate policing and safety within these answers, it could confuse the issue. And I think it'd be confusing, I think for me, reading the responses to decide what people are saying is important that we're talking about here, with safety as divorced from policing.
Well, Amanda has a good, yeah, and she's getting some agreement. Amanda had a good idea to that, which was to move policing as an example, maybe to the like a third example.
Oh, just not as the first example?
Maybe not as the first. I mean, remember, if it rises to the top, we're going to do a whole action or theme team around it. So we're going to dive into what is safe, what do people mean when they say safety?
Right. And I think that's fine. I just wouldn't want to see police as being separate from safety in these items. I think that gets confusing.
I agree. Move it to somewhere in the like third, so it doesn't stand out so much, but keep it in there.
All right. Any other thoughts on the safety issue before we move forward to the other ideas?
I just had a question about what does access to public safety resources actually mean?
So if I were to read that as a survey taker, I would understand that to mean whether I have access to police, whether I have access to fire, whether I have access to dispute resolution and mediation through the city, and whether if there's a conflict where my safety is involved, or potentially my safety is involved, I know what to do to resolve that conflict, or I have an idea of who to turn to for that. And that could be a whole different slew of things, but that would be my interpretation of that as a survey taker.
So should we spell it out more? I mean, not
Yes.
all that.
I think as the attorney, it makes more sense for you, but for a lay person, I think it needs to be spelled out: fire, safety, and security.
And everyone's going to want, you know, an ambulance to come and a firefighter to come to them. But like policing is a little bit different, like in this day and age. So like, I'm just not sure of like how to word it so that we have like emergency response, and policing. I know that police do emergency response. So, but also like feeling safe in your community is not necessarily tied to policing for everyone. And I don't, want to make this conversation drag on forever. Anyways, that's what
I was thinking too, like safety. I was thinking like my sidewalks outside my house, like are not a safe place to walk. So that's what I was also thinking. Like safety could include like bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, this was a hard one to write. I wasn't sure kind of what but I'm making notes for sure.
I think that's why it's really important under each one, like you have the sliding scale and you also have the opportunity to write why that's important to you. So if I have an issue with policing and it makes me feel not safe, I have the opportunity to write that in there. And CeCe, if you want to talk about your sidewalks, you have an opportunity to write that in there and we just see what comes back.
Okay, so we've got Wade and Cameron here with questions, their hands up.
I'm removing.
Okay, so Wade.
Did someone say we were taking G off about youth engagement?
Yeah, we discussed that would fit as an example under community building and inclusion.
Okay, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, and Christina, I see your hand up.
Yes, under the safety, I do think that we should have emergency response listed, because that would be the 911, and then it would be fire, police, medical, or police or medical, so because they all play a role, because the way it reads right now, it doesn't include fire in there, but fire plays a huge role in safety.
How about we just spell it out? Safety, then you say, for example, fires, policing, security, emergency response.
Maybe if it's that contentious, it could be in the other topic. Like if we don't know how to word this, maybe we just put it in other, like when we took out youth engagement and moved it to other, like, I don't know. Unless somebody, because we all know that everybody wants to have police officers. I mean, everybody wants firefighters and everybody wants like EMS and all of that. I don't know. So to me, I'm not sure that like why ranking that on there is super important.
But I think I disagree in the fact that safety as a topic, safety is top of mind for a lot of people with how they feel about their community. Like, do you feel safe in your community? And then for examples are, here are some things that contribute to how you feel safe. But I like still keep, like, it's a big topic that I think is just as important as climate action for some people in our community.
And I totally agree with you, especially in just like we were talking about underrepresented communities and other communities. There is a lot of fear with anytime they don't want to deal with the government officials. They don't want to even go anywhere. So if we spell it out that yes, we are looking for whenever you need help, we have these resources, please go there. So I personally think for the underrepresented communities and the people some people who come to this country, really, they with the mindset that is the place I'm not going to go. So I personally think that needed to be spelled out, and it's a very important. Safety is really the key. And I think that's what we as a Beaverton are. We pride ourselves because that's what we say. Beaverton is the second or first safest city in the country. That was one of the ranking. And we need to highlight that one and work on it and make sure we stay that way.
And I see Jen's hand is up too.
Just thinking about safety and where it being part of the survey, I think somebody mentioned this a few minutes ago that like we almost need to ask people not only is this a priority, but also like, is this something we should do more of or do less of? It feels like who's going to look at a survey that says safety and go, nah, that's not a priority. It just seems like something everybody's going to say, yeah, this is a priority. But what we really need to know from them is, do we need to do more? Like, are you not feeling safe? So maybe that would come back naturally in the comments, but I wonder, I mean, I don't want to like clog this up too much, but it's almost like we need to know like where it is on the priority spectrum and then where it is on the, we need to do more of this, or we're doing fine, or we need to do less of this, or maybe there's nothing that we need to do less of. I don't know.
I think that's an important point to take. And I think that might be something that we do with a second survey after we see what's going on here, because this will give us our first sort of hit as to what people are thinking about. Because for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if in a community like Beaverton with very, very low rates of violent crime, even for the area, and we live in this part of Oregon, it's very low in violent crime in general anyway, that's not really on the tip of people's minds. And for the people who it is, I would bet it's more about reform in the system, and we get comments about that. And that can help us shape what we go out and ask about. Because I think some of these things people might think of as, say, a 4 or a 5 in terms of how important it is, just because it's something that is just in the background and always there and that we're doing fine about. But I think that the goal of this survey is not to say police good or bad, business development good or bad versus workforce development or anything like that, but to say what are you thinking about? What do you care about? And because we don't know why they care about it, right? Someone might say affordable housing is really important, or housing is a really important issue to me, but some of those people might be saying, well, because we need more affordable housing. And other people might be saying, because there's too much affordable housing going in and my block feels too crowded, right? We don't know what they mean when they say it's important, but I think this survey is the signal to us to say, hey, let's dig. And then one thought I had before I see Cameron's hands back up again, to cut this list down, I think it would make sense to combine transportation and land use planning. I think as people think of those, they often go hand in hand, and the people who care about one tend to care about the other. That would get us down to 10 topics. And I know the golden number is 7, but at least it gets us a step closer. So I don't know if folks have thoughts on that. But then I see Cameron's hand is up.
I just have a quick question. I personally think safety is such an important topic, and it is also, we don't want to be colorblind, because that is the topic which is really resonates with a certain color. We need to stay on that thing, because safety means color plays a role there. And by minimizing that, we are minimizing the color difference.
Amanda?
I just wanted to recommend against transportation and land use going together. I think that's because a lot of, not everybody who is using the public transportation maybe owns their house or is aware of city planning issues or things like that. I think about my roommate who is very takes the bus and the train everywhere, but isn't at all tapped into land use items, but transportation would be a high priority for him, but it wouldn't be connected to land use or population growth or anything like that.
All right, so what other folks think about transportation and land use?
I agree with Amanda's analysis.
Okay.
I do have a comment though. See that transportation and land use are hand in hand, in fact, because in land use, we are trying to combine that how the parking structure works and how many parking, because anytime you're building a house, then they are requiring that, okay, do we need two or 4 parkings? Because generally, currently, the Beaverton code says that you have to have at least 2 cars inside, you have to have a garage and 2 parking spaces for a single family dwelling. If it's R5 zoning or R7 zoning. If you go to R1 or R2 zoning, then you are down to 2 parking requirements. And that's the place that the land use and transportation come in hand, because if we're going smaller sizes, then automatically our parking becomes an issue. When the parking becomes issue, then we have to focus on the transportation. So I think they both are interrelated.
I think a lot of things overlap and are interrelated. I think the question is, when you as an average citizen are viewing this survey, then the kind of issues that Amanda brought up is more significant. Whereas after this survey is done, when we look at the more details, then the issues that Cameron is bringing up become more significant. So as an initial play, I go with what Amanda has described.
Yeah, I also tend to agree with Amanda and Wade. Like Wade said, there are a lot of overlapping areas. I can see climate action ties directly into transportation and land use as well. But I think keeping them separate will help us better understand what people really care about and what they're thinking about.
Okay, so it sounds like the general consensus is to keep those separate. Another pitch to try to pare things down. What about, and this reopens the safety bubble that we closed a minute ago, but what about saying safety and emergency preparedness? I think those are pretty close.
I was just going to recommend that, because I know working in that public safety emergency preparedness, we see those as 2 huge roles. And so you read my mind. I was just going to recommend that.
Do folks have concerns about combining those 2?
That's a great idea. Great idea. I like it.
I mean, if we want to keep combine, I'm okay with having a long list too. I think if people can answer 10 things, they can answer 12. But I would say, other potential pairings could be, food security and homelessness go hand in hand, and senior care and healthcare. And those might be controversial, but I would just, if you're trying to get it down to 10, those would be my suggestions as well.
Well, I feel like keep going, but I'm taking notes. I feel like I've got a good amount of notes to work with. And then this will lead to you're going to be tabling, you're going to be hopefully doing some other events. And then hopefully you will be visiting, we'll have their project manager hired in the next, hopefully, month or 2. I'd like that person to start coordinating visits to other boards and commissions with you, with one of you with them. I think that'll be good. We do action teams or theme teams. We go back out with another survey then with, you know, here's 100 and whatever things that those action teams came up with, and then they vote again or something like that. Could be next steps, or however you want to kind of advise that to go. But I think we have a potential path. It feels pretty good.
All right, well, CeCe, I really appreciate you putting this together and bringing it to us. I think it's been helping us to get going, and I'm excited that we're actually starting to do concrete things now, because I like concrete things.
Our interim manager is great.
Shannon, do you want to mention night market? There was a question about night market in the chat.
So yes, you will have the opportunity to table at night market. And then also keep in mind that in September is welcoming week. And so there will be a lot of events that are focused on your on underrepresented communities. And so we'll be able to reach out to them at those times too, instead of just digitally. We'll be able to do it in person.
And I see Amy and Amanda still have their hands up. Want to make sure that we're not ending before you get to pop in here on your questions or comments.
Mine's a new subject, so if we want to wrap that up, I just have a reminder of something we need to talk about before we end.
Oh, mine's actually about the questionnaire. Should I ask that first then, Amanda? Or, okay, cool. I just wanted to double check. It sounded like we ended that we were going to rank each individual item and have a blank space under each item for people to add comments. Is that how everybody's understanding it? And then we also keep the last question, number 2, at the end.
Yeah, I will see what options we have, because it won't look like your slide. That's just for that. We'll see what tech options that we have.
Okay.
That's how I understand it too. We can try to go for that.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like to try to add comments for each of them, but only have one box at the end would be really difficult.
Yeah, I don't know how that flows on a phone if you're, that's a lot of like scrolling, but we'll ask what the best way to lay that out is.
All right, Amanda?
I'm supposed to remind CeCe, CeCe, do you still need another person to interview since I can't be part of that committee?
Thanks, Amanda. That's why we work together, so you can remind me to say things. Yeah, Subba and I are going to be interviewing project managers. So we have a nice pool of people. So I'm really excited about that. So if anyone is interested in joining us, those are during the day.
What is the time commitment?
2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, it's the week of the 19th.
And what is the time commitment though?
Right now, there's an afternoon and 2 morning slots for about 2.5 hours a piece.
A piece. Okay.
So it is a little time, it is more than a little time commitment that week. So if anyone is just even slightly interested, let me know and I will follow up with you and give you specifics, but it's the week of the 19th during the day.
And I do have a question though.
Okay.
For those 2.5 hours, then there would be more time required to finalize our thoughts.
Yeah, I think we'll need to have a wrap-up meeting of talking about our finalists and making recommendation.
I can be potentially available.
Okay.
Okay. Somebody better comes.
I can email you.
I could possibly do that as well.
Okay, I'll email both of you.
Depending on the dates.
Okay, I'll send those to you.
All right, so unless there's anything else for the good of the order, that is it. Anyone have any parting things they want to share? All right, well, thank you all very much. I think we made some good progress today. We had good discussions with Jahmai and Victor, and we went over time, so I appreciate you all staying tuned in and engaged and allowing us to get all this done. So I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Right.
Yay! Good job, Shannon. Thank you. You want to stop us recording?
Yeah.